Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and Miyirtz Hashem today we will be learning Daf Nun Gimel Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today on the bottom line of the Shulchan Aruch on Nun Gimel Amid Aleph Siman Reish Ayin Gimel Sif Zayin. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanesunim Batzaru Bashivya, Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha, Hamakayim Yerachem Aleihem V'Yetzieh Mitzar L'Rvacha Me'afel L'Oira U'Mishibed L'Geula, Hashta Bagala V'Zman Kariv and Amar Armein. Our learning should also be a schus Refuah Shalema for Tzvi ben Leah Miriam, and it should be a schus for Yisrael ben Rachel, Yonasan ben Michal, Yoel ben Michal. The Rebbeinu Shalom should watch over them, together with all of our brothers and sisters who find themselves in harm's way. B'chol Makom Shehem. Okay, so we've been discussing here in this Siman, we've been discussing the halachas of Kiddush b'makom Suda, and now finally we come to the last sif in this very, very fascinating Siman, Sif Zayin. Says the Mechaber, Yesh Oimrim, there are those that say, and this is brought down from a Rosh in Arvei Psachim, and the Rosh himself brings down this opinion in the name of a Yesh Oimrim. Yesh Oimrim she'ein mekachin ela la'or haner. There are those that say that Kiddush Friday night must be made la'or haner. It must be made by the light of the Shabbos Neros. Now, when we were learning the halachas of the Neros Shel Shabbos, we learned that when you light the Neros Shel Shabbos, the bracha is supposed to be made by the Neros that are by the Shabbos Suda. Remember, we learned that back in the day when the homes were dark, they did not only light Neros by the Suda, they lit Neros all over the house. One of the ikar reasons for Hadlakas Neros Shel Shabbos is Shalom Bayis. People shouldn't be stumbling around in the dark on Friday night. So you light Neros Shel Shabbos to light the house up. There should be Shalom Bayis. You should have a house with a peaceful atmosphere because people aren't walking around and stubbing their toes. But you also must light Neros by the Suda, because that creates a much bigger simcha and Einik Shabbos by the Suda, that by the Suda you're eating la'or haner. And we learned that when you make the bracha, those are the neros you're supposed to make the bracha on. You're supposed to make the bracha on the neros that are by the Suda. So you see that the Hadlakas Neros Shel Shabbos, the Neros Shel Shabbos are tied very much to the Suda. Kiddush is tied very much to the Suda. And Kiddush el mamakom Suda, right? So over here, the Mechaber brings down from the Rosh, there are those that say that Kiddush has to be made la'or haner, by the light of the Shabbos Neros. But the Mechaber continues and he says, V'yesh Oimrim she'eina Kiddush tali b'ner. But there are those that say, and if you look in the Be'er HaGola, this is brought down in the name of the Mordechai, Torah b'shem Goyin u'Mordechai b'shem Rabbi Simcha. V'chein kasav Hagoyis Maimonides Perik Hey. So the Yeshar, there are those that say she'eina Kiddush tali b'ner. Kiddush is not dependent on the Neros Shel Shabbos. You don't have such a connection necessarily between the halachas of Kiddush and the Neros Shel Shabbos that somehow Neros Shel Shabbos is a requirement of Kiddush, that Kiddush must be made by the Neros, and therefore, turning to Gimel Amid Beis, says the Mechaber, V'im hu nene b'chotzer yoser, if you will enjoy your Suda much more if you eat it outside in the chotzer, mipnei ha'avir, maybe inside the home it's stuffy, so you want to go eat outside on the patio and you'll enjoy your Suda much more. Ay mipnei azavuvim, or maybe there are flies inside the house and outside in the chotzer there aren't any. So then, mekadosh b'chotzer va'oichol sham. So go make kiddush in the chotzer and eat your Suda in the chotzer. Now, realize what the Mechaber says. The Mechaber says, mekadesh b'chotzer, make kiddush outside in the chotzer, away from the neros. The neros are inside the house, and va'oichol sham, and eat there. You got to do both. You can't make kiddush inside the house and then go eat the Suda outside in the chotzer, because ain't kiddush ela b'makom Suda. Now, we did have an opinion earlier that said if you could see the chutzner from inside, and you could see where you're making kiddush from outside in the chutzner, we had an opinion that said that's okay, but we learned that we don't paskin that way. So the Mechaber tells you over here that what you should do is, if it's more comfortable outside, and you'll have more Einik Shabbos if you eat the Suda outside, so then yes, Mekadosh b'chutzner, make kiddush in the chutzner away from the neiros, v'oichol sham, and eat your Suda outside in the chutzner, afal pisha ein roya haner, even though you're not going to be able to see the neiros from the place that you're making kiddush and the place that you're eating your Suda. Why, says the Mechaber, the whole purpose of the Neiros Shel Shabbos is for Einik Shabbos. The whole purpose of the Neiros is to create a happier, more comfortable environment and ambiance. If it's going to accomplish the opposite, if the Neiros Shel Shabbos are going to force you to eat inside where it's stuffy or where there's flies, that's counterproductive. So Shaneris la'oining nitztavu v'loy l'tzar, the mitzvah of adlakis Neiros Shel Shabbos wasn't given to make you uncomfortable, and the Mechaber closes off the Siman and he says, V'hachi mistabra, and that reasoning is very good reasoning, and that's what makes sense. So you see over here that the Mechaber is being machriya, that if you have a strong reason to make kiddush and eat away from the neiros, you're allowed to do that, because again, the neiros were given for Einig, not for Tsar. Having said that, let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Lamed Aleph, Mekadosh b'chotzer v'oichol sham. The Chavetz Chaim makes the point that I spoke out. Aval lo yekadosh b'bayis v'yoichol b'chotzer. But don't say, well, I want to be machmir. I want to make kiddush b'makam haneiros in order to be Mekayim, the first Yesh Oimrim, that Kiddush should be in the Makam of the Neiros. And then I'll go eat outside. Don't do that, says the Chavetz Chaim, because then you're going to run afoul of the halacha of Ein Kiddush Ela B'Makam Suda. Now you're making Kiddush in one location, and you're doing it, and you're going to go have your Suda outside. That's the worst madrega of all when it comes to changing places between Kiddush and the Suda. You're actually leaving the home. You can't do that, even if you had das when you made Kiddush. We say you can't make Kiddush in the home and then leave the home and go eat the Suda somewhere else. And so therefore, the Chavetz Chaim stresses, don't do that. You have to do specifically what the Mechaber said, and that is make Kiddush outside in the Chutzner and have the Suda outside in the Chutzner. Ois Katan Lamed Beis, the Mechaber said, V'hachi mistabra, it is mistabra that you're allowed to do this, says the Chavetz Chaim. However, caveat, he brings down from the Magen Avram, V'hainu b'mitztar harbe. This allowance that you could go outside and make kiddush shaloi b'makam haneiros and eat the Suda there, that's only b'mitztar harbe. That's only if you're going to suffer significantly by making kiddush and eating the Suda in the makam of the neiros. If it's not going to be mitztar harbe, then really lechatchila you must make kiddush and eat the Suda b'makam haner. So he brings down from the Pri Megadim. So from the Magen Avram. So if you have a situation where it's during the summer and you like to keep the dining room at 68 degrees, and it happens to be that it's 72 degrees, so it's a little bit warm in here, that's okay. Go eat the Suda b'makam haneiros. That's not called mitztar harbe. However, if the air conditioning died and it's 80 degrees, we want to eat the Suda, and outside there's a breeze and it's comfortable, and if you eat inside, everybody's going to be dripping sweat and going to be highly uncomfortable, then in a chidami, go eat outside. Continues the Chavetz Chaim in Ois Katan Lamed Beis, and he says, V'ayin b'Pri Megadim, shemitzaded, the Pri Megadim takes the position, to Yosef Toiv sheyikadish babayis. Still in all, even if you're mitztar harbe, the best course of action would be make kiddush babayis, make kiddush in the house by the neiros, v'yoichal ma'at, and eat a little bit. So make kiddush by the neiros. Remember what we learned yesterday. If you make kiddush by the neiros, and then you wash, and then you eat a kazayis of lechem, or even if you make kiddush by the neiros, and you drink a revius of yayin, of course, everybody would have to drink a revius of yayin, and it could be that the Mekadosh would have to drink 2 reviusin, one for Kiddush and one for Kiddush b'Makam Suda, but then everybody's already yotze Kiddush b'Makam Suda. Once you yotze Kiddush b'Makam Suda, fine, go outside to the Chutzner. It's not a problem. So that's the eights of the Pri Megadim. The Pri Megadim says, Come on, there's a way out. Make Kiddush in the house. Eat or drink the minimum to meet the requirements of Kiddush B'Magul Suda. Then go outside and finish your Suda by the Chotzer. And remember what we learned yesterday also. You have no problem with Bracha Rishona. You have no problem with Birkas Hamazon. Right? So go outside, finish your Suda outside. He sends us back to Siman Reish Samach Gimel Sif Tes, where there, the Mishnah Berurah just makes the point. He says, now, remember, we're discussing over here the possibility of not making Kiddush and not eating the Suda b'mekayim haner. Now, especially in our days, the only nearest that we light are by the dining room, are by the Suda. We don't light nearest in the bedrooms. We don't light nearest around the house. Now, let's analyze this for a second. If you light your Shabbos nearest in the dining room, and then you go outside to the patio or to the deck, and you make Kiddush and you eat the Chotzer on the deck, you eat the Suda outside on the deck, and let's say you have company and you have a 5-course meal and everything else, and your Suda stretches out for a long time, and now you come back inside and your neiros are out, what hana did you ever have from the neiros? That's a problem. If you're never nene from the neiros, it could be that you have a problem with bracha of HaTorah on the neiros shel Shabbos. So the Mishnah Berurah over there stresses you have to make sure to get some hana from the neiros. So either do like the Pri Megadim and make Kiddush and eat a little bit, la'ar haner, so that you get the simcha of the neiros shel Shabbos, or make sure that you come back inside after the Suda when the neiros are still burning and sit a little bit by the neiros, but make sure that you get some hana from the neiros, otherwise you might run into a halachic issue. And so we complete Siman Reish Ayin Gimel. We move along now to a new Siman, Siman Reish Ayin Dalid, Dinei B'tzias HaPas B'Shabbos, the halachas that govern making the hamoitzi, cutting the challah, the halachas of Lechem Mishnah by the Suda of Shabbos, Uboy Dalit Seifim, and here we have 4 Seifim. Says the Mechar B'Sif Aleph. We learn in a Gemara in Shabbos Taf Kuf Yud Zayin Amud Beis, Boitzeya al Shtei Kikaros, and the Ramah puts in the word Shleimos. You have to make the hamoitzi over 2 whole loaves. We need Lechem Mishnah. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut Aleph. Shtei Kikaros. We need Lechem Mishnah. You need 2 loaves. Why do you need 2 loaves? Why do you need Lechem Mishnah? Says the Chavetz Chaim, Zecher Lamon. This is a zecher, a remembrance to the man that we ate in the midbar. Diksiv, because the Torah Kedosha writes by the man, Lok to Lechem Mishnah. On Erev Shabbos, they picked a double portion of man. We've mentioned already many times since we started learning Hilchos Shabbos. We just heard last week in Parshas Bereshis, the Parsha of Vayechulu, and it says, Vayevarech Elokim Yom HaShvi Vayekadesh Osai. The Rebbeinu Shalom benched the 7th day, he benched Shabbos, Vayevarech Osai, and also Vayekadesh. And the Rebbeinu Shalom also was Mekadesh. He sanctified the 7th day. He sanctified Shabbos. Rashi brings down the Chazal, Barchehu Baman and Kachehu Baman. The Rebbeinu Shalom benched Shabbos with man, and he was also Mekadesh Shabbos with man. How so? He gave Shabbos a bracha that on Friday a double portion of man fell. Why on Friday did a double portion of man fall? Because Friday is Erev Shabbos. On Friday you got a double portion of man, 1 portion for Friday, 1 portion for Shabbos. So that's a bracha that was given to Shabbos. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, only a single portion of man fell. But on Erev Shabbos a double portion fell because you got an extra portion for Shabbos. So that was a bracha for Shabbos. Also, Vayikadesh Osai. The Rebbeinu Shalom also sanctified Shabbos. How did he sanctify Shabbos? Say Chazal, because on Shabbos no man fell at all. That's a kedusha for Shabbos. That's a sanctification of Shabbos. How so? Because on Shabbos you don't go out to collect man. On Shabbos you sit like a king. On Shabbos you already got your food. On Erev Shabbos. Now, does that mean that it was day-old man? No, because Chazal tell us that Shabbos' man fell on Erev Shabbos, but it was Shabbos' man. Kind of like the lechem aponim, right? The lechem aponim stayed nice and warm and fresh for a whole week. So guess what? The mun that fell on Erev Shabbos wasn't Friday mun, and on Shabbos you're eating Friday mun. That wouldn't be a mile for Shabbos. That the rest of the week you eat fresh mun, and on Shabbos you eat day-old mun. No, it wasn't day-old mun. Even though it fell on Friday, but it was Shabbos' mun. So it was fresh. It wasn't old mun. But that's a double thing. One is the bracha, that a double portion of mun fell on Shabbos. The other one is that on Shabbos you don't have to go out and collect. On Shabbos, no mun fell. But whatever it is, we see that the Torah Dirshu tells us that Shabbos got a special bracha when it comes to mun of a lechem mishnah. So when we make a Suda on Shabbos, we need to make a bracha over lechem mishnah. We need to make a bracha over a double portion, 2 loaves. The Aruch HaShulchan writes that this is actually a daraisa. It's not a drabanan, it's not a minig. He says we learn it out from extra words in the pasuk. The words lechem mishnah are extra in the pasuk, because the pasuk tells us in other ways that on Erev Shabbos there was a double portion. The words lechem mishnah are completely extra, and we darshan from there a din daraisa that on Shabbos when you sit down to the Suda you have to have lechem mishnah. It's also brought down another reason for lechem mishnah is a zecher to zachar v'shamar. The same way we light 2 neros for Shabbos. The strict halacha of hadlakas neros Shabbos, you only need 1 ner. Why do we light 2? One of the things that's brought down is zachar v'shamar. So too, lechem mishnah, zachar v'shamar. Very fascinating. The Klausenberger Rebbe, Zechet Tzaddik Kodesh Tavracha, brings down in the Shalos Teshuvos Divrei Yatziv a very interesting mechilta. He brings down that really on Friday, 3 portions of mun fell. 3 portions? I thought a double portion. No. The Divrei Yatziv brings down that Shabbos' portion was a double portion. It's not just that on Friday they picked a double portion, 1 for Friday, 1 for Shabbos. On Friday they collected lechem mishnah for Shabbos. Shabbos' portion was double. Now, reading the Mechilta, I just read it very quickly, reading the Mechilta in the words of the Divrei Yatziv, it sounds to me even more interesting. It sounds to me not so much that the oimer of, not that they got 3 oimrim, 1 oimer. The normal one was 1 oimer l'gulgailas, an oimer for each member of the household. It's not that on Friday they had on Friday they collected 2 oimrim, 1 for Friday and 1 for Shabbos. I'm sorry, it's not that they collected 3 oimrim. 1 oimer, the standard for Erev Shabbos, and then a second oimer for Shabbos. No, there were 3 oimrim. 1 oimer for Friday, and then 2 oimrim for Shabbos. Shabbos was double. Shabbos' portion was a double portion. And thus, on Shabbos, we need to make the hamaitzi over a double portion. We need to make the hamaitzi over lechem mishnah. It's also brought down in the Shla. The Shla says that this idea that on Shabbos you have to have lechem mishnah, there's 2 different meanings to the word mishnah. Mishnah could mean double. We could also look at the word mishnah and see the word mishunah. It has to be different. Lechem mishunah. The lechem has to be mishunah. Says the Shla, what does that mean that the lechem has to be mishunah? It has to be different. It has to be better. It has to be meshubach. It has to be tastier. It has to be extra special. So when you make the challah for Shabbos, you don't just, like all week, you eat rye bread. You don't make for Shabbos 2 loaves of rye bread and have a double rye bread. No. On Shabbos, you have to make lechem mishunah. You got to pick a good recipe, and you have to make extra tasty challah for Shabbos. Okay, so that's the beginning of the Chavetz Chaim here, a nice cut in Aleph. He said, why do we need shtei kikarais? Why do we need lechem mishnah, 2 loaves? Zecher lamon diksiv loktu lechem mishnah. On Friday they collected lechem mishnah. Says the Chavetz Chaim weiter, this is not only a halacha on Shabbos. V'gam b'Yom Tov tzarich litzaya al shtei kikarais. On Yom Tov you also need to have lechem mishnah. Now why is it that on Yom Tov you also have to have lechem mishnah? Because for Yom Tov you also didn't go out and collect mun. The same way you didn't collect mun on Shabbos, you did not collect mun on Yom Tov. Even if Yom Tov fell out on Wednesday, you didn't go out and collect mun on Yom Tov. So Erev Yom Tov, you got a double portion because you needed to have mun for Yom Tov. Now the truth is that happens to be a machlokes rishonim. Taisus, I think it's an Erev, and Taisus brings down a shita that says that the mun did fall on Yom Tov. So it's a machlokes rishonim. But nonetheless, the Mishnah Berurah is machriya over here. The Mishnah Berurah says that on Yom Tov you also have to have lechem mishnah. Continues the Chavetz Chaim and he says, "V'gam hanoshim mechuyavos b'lechem mishnah." Women are also chayiv in lechem mishnah. So if a woman is going to eat the suda by herself, she also needs to make hamaitzi over lechem mishnah. Shahayu gam kemenes haman. After all, the women also enjoyed the miracle of the man. When it comes to the question of whether can you be yaitza lechem mishnah with cake, with pasa babakistin? Can you take 2 loaves of babka and make a mezainis of 2 loaves of babka? Now, it could be, if you're making your bracha on pasa babakistin, it could be you're being kaveh sud on pasa babakistin, maybe you'd have to make a moitzi. So for this, the Mishnah Berurah sends us back to the whole discussion of pasa babakistin. When is it considered lechem? When is it not considered lechem? Etc. etc. Sham Mishnah Berurah sivkat lamadal dalit ubir halacha. Ice cotton base. The Ramah interjected over here in Sif Aleph and said that the shteiki karos have to be shleimos. They have to be whole, intact loaves. So the Chavetz Chaim brings out an interesting shaila. How about if you have a loaf of challah that is whole, but part of the loaf is inedible? What happened? Somebody made challah right before Shabbos, and the timer on the oven wasn't working, and they burnt the challah. But only one end of the challah is burnt. So one end of the challah is burnt to a crisp. It's not edible. The rest of the challah is edible. But now you have an intact, whole loaf. It's a shalem, but part of it is not usable. Says the Chavetz Chaim, if you have a loaf that is partially burnt, but it hasn't been cut, so it is a shalem. There are those that say the yotzid bala in your lechem mishnah, that you can use that for lechem mishnah, ayin b'shari tshuva. Continues the Chavetz Chaim and he says, Im ein loy pash shlema. If you don't have, the Ramah interjected over here, and he said you must have a shalem. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Im ein loy pash shlema. If you don't have a shalem, ein loy ma'akev. The halacha that you require a shalem is not li'ikuva. That's not a must. It's not a strict requirement that you have to have a shalem. The bottom line is, you could make kiddush, and you could be yaitze kiddush b'makom suda, and you could eat your Shabbos suda if all you have is the kazayis of lechem. So the idea of a shalem, yes, covered the bracha, covered the Shabbos suda, you should have 2 shlemim, but it's not li'ikuva. The proper minig is, says the Chavetz Chaim, shezeh shebaytzeya, the one who's making the hamoitzi over the lechem mishnah, yechaven liftar beberkas hamoitzi kol hamesubin. He should be moitzi everybody else around the table in his hamoitzi. So Friday night, this is the accepted minig all over. Friday night, when you come sit down by the suda to make hamoitzi, it shouldn't be that everybody makes their own hamoitzi. No, the head of the household, the one who's making the hamoitzi over the lechem mishnah, he should make the hamoitzi, and he should have in mind to be moitzi everybody else in the bracha, and they should have in mind to be yoitze with his bracha. Why? Says the Mishnah Berurah, I'll tell you why. He has to remind the mesubin, those around the table, that they should have in mind to be yotze with his bracha, because we want that everybody should fulfill this requirement of lechem mishnah. If everybody's going to make their own hamaitzi, what's going to happen? So the baitzeya, he's making a hamaitzi over lechem mishnah. But the family members sitting around the table, they're making a hamoitzi on what? Either on a bilkala that they have, or on a piece of challah that they get from the baitzeya, but they don't have lechem mishnah, so how are they being yotze lechem mishnah? So it shouldn't be that way. The baitzeya should make a hamoitzi over lechem mishnah, and he should be moitzi everybody with his bracha. Ukisha moitzi acherim, and the Mishnah Berurah tells us, whenever you're being moitzi other people in the hamoitzi, yoimar berishus Rabbaisai. You should say berishus, that you're making the bracha being moitzi the other people with their permission, with their acquiescence. You're doing it berishus. I haven't seen so much that the minig is to say berishus Rabbaisai. I've seen berishus, not berishus Rabbaisai. Now, says the Mishnah Berurah, this is true. Afa pishu abal ba'isai agadol. This is true even for Tati, or even for the Rosh Yeshiva. Even if the one that's making the bracha of hamoitzi is the one who doesn't need permission from anybody else to make the bracha, he's the head of the household, right? Still, he should say berishus v'hu mi derech anova. That is proper humility. And the truth is, we just learned that in Rashi, in Parshas Bereshis. The Rebbeinu Shalom said, Nase Adam b'tzalmenu. Let us make Adam b'tzalmenu, in our form. Who is the Rebbeinu Shalom talking to? Says Rashi, brings down from Chazal, that the Rebbeinu Shalom was talking to the Malachim. He was talking to Pamalia Delay. He was talking to the Malachim up in Shemayim. Nase Adam b'tzalmenu. Let us make man in our form. Now then the pasuk says, Vayivra Elikim es Adam. Hashem created man. The Malachim didn't create man. Also, the Rebbeinu Shalom obviously doesn't need rishus from anybody. The Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't need anybody's permission. So why does the pasuk say Nasa Adam b'tzalmenu? Says Rashi, to teach us derech eretz. To teach us derech eretz that the gadol should be nimlach in the katan. The gadol should ask permission from the katan, even though he doesn't need permission. It's a formality, but it shows hanava. Says the Mechaber Weiter. Going back to the first line here in Sif Aleph, Siman Reisha and down Sif Aleph, continues the Mechaber. So the Mechaber had said, Baitzei al shtei kikaros shleimos, you have to make the bracha of Hamoitzi over 2 whole kikaros. Now the Mechaber goes a little bit more into the weeds. What does that mean? He should be Baitzei on 2 kikaros. Sha'oiche shtein biyodai. He should hold both of them in his hands. When you make the Hamoitzi, hold both loaves. Ubaitseya hatachtoina, and then cut the bottom one. So the Mechaber is paskening over here, like those shittas who hold, that you only cut one of the lechem mishnah. Doesn't mean you're only allowed to cut one, but you only need to cut one. You have to have lechem mishnah, and you have to hold both of them when you make the hamoitzi, because the hamoitzi has to be made over lechem mishnah. But then you could put one of them down, and you cut one of them. Which one should you cut? You should cut the bottom one. Okay? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Gimel. Biyadoi. You should hold both of them, B'shas HaMaitzi. When you make the bracha of HaMaitzi, you make the bracha of HaMaitzi over the lechem mishnah. Ois Cotton Daled Ubaitseya, but you're going to cut only one. Says the Mishnah Berurah, why? How do you know you only have to cut one? Maybe the requirement of lechem mishnah requires that you should cut both. You should use both. Says the Mishnah Berurah, this is based on the pasuk, because the din of lechem mishnah we learned out from the man. Where does it say lechem mishnah by the man? It says loktu lechem mishnah. They collected a double portion. Now the collecting, what do we do that symbolizes the collecting? The holding. We hold the lechem mishnah keneged the pasuk that says loktu lechem mishnah, that they collected and gathered a lechem mishnah. So we hold lechem mishnah. Says the Mishnah Berurah inside. Sharei loy nemar lechem mishnah ela b'lekita. It only mentions lechem mishnah by the collecting of the man. But having said that, says the Mishnah Berurah, v'rashal ushla, the marshal, the shla, nagu lachtoi shnehem. They had the minute to cut both of the chalas. Kipirish harashba. This is based on the way the Rashba understands the Gemara in Shabbos on Kuf Yod Zayin Amid Beis. V'chein hiskim agra, and the Gra also held this way, that you should cut both of them. Okay. Truth is that Yarch HaShulchan brings down these shittas that say to cut both, and he explains based on the machlokes of how to understand the Gemara in Shabbos where it comes from. But at the end he asks a tumua gedola, because even though, yes, you come up with one Amora that held that you should cut both, it's mashma that the majority held that you only cut one, and also the Basra holds that you should only cut one. The later Amorim held that you only cut one. But be that as it may, this is the Marshal and the Shlot, the Gra, they held that you should cut both. Now, the Chavetz Chaim, the Torah Kedosha is Chasal Mamoinei Shal Yisrael. The Torah Kedosha doesn't ask people to spend money unnecessarily and is concerned with the financial well-being of Klal Yisrael. So says the Chavetz Chaim, V'makber al ha'hoitzah. If it's pashut too expensive and you don't want to have to cut 2 chalas by each one of the 3 meals on Shabbos, on the Shalosh Seudas, says the Chavetz Chaim, V'makber al ha'hoitzah. I'll give you an eitzah what to do, says the Chavetz Chaim. Oisa shalosh chalois gedolos. When your wife bakes challah, remember, we had the Bir Halacha all the way back in the beginning of Hilchos Shabbos that says you should bake challah for Shabbos. He does not like, he speaks very harshly against the idea of buying challah for Shabbos. Bake challah for Shabbos. So he says, when you bake the challah for Shabbos, make 3 large challahs. v'shalish ketanois, and make 3 bilkelach. Ubechol suda baitzea achas gedola v'achas ketana, and by each meal make the bracha over lechem mishnah on 1 challah gedola and 1 bilkela, and then cut both. So now it's not that you're cutting 2 big challahs by each meal. By each meal you're cutting 1 big challah and 1 little bilkela. But the Mishnah Berurah says, Lamaisa v'ha'olam nehagin ka Shulchan Aruch. The Welt is naig like the Shulchan Aruch, that you do not have to cut both challahs, you only need to cut 1. Kasav Pri Begadim writes, Im ein loy b'Shabbos pas Yisrael, if you don't have any pas Yisrael available to you on Shabbos, ki em pas any Yehudi, all you have is pas palter, mutter lechal mimeni, you're allowed to eat it, v'ayin sham oid. Ois cut and hay, the Mechaber said, you cut one of the challahs, which one? The tachtoina, the bottom one. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Habach Toma. The Bach reacts to this in wonderment. The Beis Yosef, the Mechaber says this in the Beis Yosef, that you cut the bottom one. The Bach reacts in wonderment. Why? We know the rule is that we never pass by a mitzvah. What does that mean? En mavir ala mitzvahs. So most men, right away, they deal with this halacha every day, because you go to Shacharis in the morning and you have a talis zekel, you have your talis bag. What do you have inside your talis bag? Inside your talis bag, you have the smaller tefillin zekel. You have the little pouch with the tefillin in them. You also have your talis. Now, which one do you do first? Generally speaking, you put on the talis before you put on the tefillin. Therefore, the halacha is that when you put the talis and the tefillin in the pouch, the talis is supposed to be more accessible to you than the tefillin. It should be so that when you open the bag, you encounter the talis first, not that you encounter the tefillin first. Because if it's going to be that you encounter the tefillin first, you're going to have to put on the tefillin first. Why? Because ein mavir ala mitzvahs. If you're going to encounter the tefillin first, and you're going to ignore the tefillin, and instead go to the talis, you are passing over the mitzvah of tefillin. So you have a mitzvah of tefillin in front of you. You're going to daven chakras now, right? So you're ready to put on talis and tefillin. Now you got to the tefillin first, but you're not putting them on. Instead, you're going to pass them by, and you're going to go directly to the talis. That's a problem of ein mavir ala mitzvahs. We don't pass by mitzvahs. So instead, we position the talis and tefillin so that you come to the talis first, and right away you take it and you put it on. Then you come to the tefillin and you put the tefillin on. So ein mavirin ala mitzvahs. So too says the Bach, I don't understand. If you're making a bracha on lechem mishnah, right away after you make the bracha, you have to cut one. You should be cutting the one that's the most accessible to you. Otherwise, you're passing over that one of the lechem mishnah and you're going to the second one. Why are you doing that? So the Chavetz Chaim continues and he says, V'ataz, the Taz recognizes the Bach's issue, and V'ataz tikein zeh. The Taz had a way to solve the Bach's problem, which was V'noag laniach hatachtoin korav elav yoiser mino elyon. Position the chalas so that the bottom one is closer to you than the top one. So what I do is, I have the bottom one right next to me, and right next to my knife, and I have the top one leaning on the bottom one. So I'm going to cut the bottom one, but I'm not being maver ala mitzvahs, because I make the bracha, and right away, the bottom one is the one that's closer to me. That's the eitz of the Taz. The eitz of the Taz, by doing that, you solve the problem of ein mavirin al ha-mitzvahs. So again, Vataz tiken zeh v'naglan yechatachtoin karvel of yosim and elyon v'nimtza shepaget chila b'tachtoina, so that you encounter the bottom one first. Or he brings down another possible eitzah from the Magen Avram, which is a little bit difficult to understand exactly what these words mean. I think it was in the Aruch HaShulchan, a way to understand it. He says like this, let's try to teach the words very literally, very strictly. Or alternatively, what you could do is, loikhin ha'elyoina b'shas birchas hamoitzi. Take the top one by the bracha of hamoitzi, umenichin oisa lamata, and put it on bottom, ubaitzin aleha, and then cut it. I think what he means is, you have the two chalas, right? You want to avoid the problem of ein mavirin ala mitzvahs. And l'chayra, if you have two chalas stacked up, right? Not the way I described, that I have the bottom one closer to me and I have the top one leaning on the bottom one. Let's imagine that we do it, strictly speaking, stacked up, one loaf on top of the other. So if you have one loaf on top of the other, and you're going to move away the top one and then cut the bottom one, that's the box problem of Ein Mavir and Ala Mitzvahs. Says the Magen Avram, I'll tell you how to get away with it. Get away with it like this. We're telling you that we want you to be Baitseya, the bottom one. We want you to cut the bottom one. But you have an Ein Mavir and Ala Mitzvahs problem. No, I'll solve the problem. Here's the problem. Here's what you do. Take the two chalas. You're going to make the bracha of Hamaitzi. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam hamaitzi lechem in the aretz. While you're making the bracha, take the top one, put it on the bottom. You finish hamaitzi lechem in the aretz. You're holding the bottom one. Take the bottom one and cut it. So now you weren't maver ala mitzvahs. You never passed by the top one. You're actually cutting the one that was originally on top. You're just repositioning it to the bottom during the bracha, and then you're going to be baitzei it. Now, one thing that's left out from the Mishnah Berurah here, or anywhere here, is why exactly are we cutting the bottom one? And it seems to be that it's divrei Kabbalah. So it's beyond my pay grade. So it's divrei Kabbalah why we cut the bottom one, but whatever it is, Lamaisa, that's what we got to do. We got to cut the bottom one. So we need to use one of these eitzes to avoid the problem of Ein Mavirin al Hamitzvahs. Continues the Mishnah Berurah here near the end of Ois Cotton Hay. V'ayla el b'simen kuf samach zayin sif aleph. He sends us back to Hilchos Betzias Hapas in Siman kuf samach zayin sif aleph ba'agah in the Rabbah. Shalo yachtich b'kikar ad achar habracha. You should not cut into the challah until you finish the bracha of Hamaitzi. Kedei sheyu hakikari shleimos ayin sham. So that you should make sure to make the brachas on loaves that are whole. What's at play over here? So when we learned Hilchos Betzias Hapas, we learned an interesting halacha. We know that the rule of thumb when it comes to Hilchos Brachas is, when you make a bracha on a food, we want to be mimayit the hefsik, the delay, between the recitation of the bracha and the eating as much as humanly possible, right? So when you make a bracha on food, you hold the food in your hand so that you're ready to eat it. You make the bracha, holding it in your hand, you make the bracha, and right away you eat. You don't make a bracha, sitting by the table like this, make a bracha, and then go get the food. We learned that when you make a bracha on bread, imagine you make the bracha on a whole loaf of bread, right? So you need to cut off a slice in order to eat it. But the bracha is supposed to be made on a sholem. The covet of a bracha is to make it on an intact loaf. So what we learned over there is, in order to reconcile the making the bracha on the sholem, and at the same time not having a hefsek in a bracha, what we do is we take the knife, we cut into the loaf, so that we already began the cutting. Not that we have to make the bracha and then take the knife and start cutting a slice of bread and have a long hefsek. Instead, what we do is we take the knife, we cut into the bread so that we already started the cutting, but we don't cut all the way. We still leave it as a sholem. We make the bracha of hamaitzi, then we finish cutting off the slice and we eat the slice. But the Ramah over there says, don't do this on Shabbos. Why? Because on Shabbos there's a halachic requirement of lechem mishnah that the hamaitzi must be made on two fully intact shleimos, on two fully intact loaves. We don't want to risk that you're going to start cutting into the challah, and maybe you'll cut a little too much, and now you don't have two shleimos. So on Shabbos, the Ramah says, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't take the risk of ruining your challah and making your challah not a sholem. However, says the Mishnah Berurah over here, but those that are medaktik in mitzvahs, they follow that Ramah, so they don't do on Shabbos what they would normally do during the week and mamish cut into the challah. But what they do is at least they scratch the surface of the challah so that the cutting was already begun before they make the bracha. Okay, we're going to stop over here. We'll continue next time. Yetz Hashem. Oh, no. We're not going to stop here. I'm sorry. We're not going to stop over here. Let's just read the words of the Ramah. Second line into Sif Aleph says the Ramah, Hagah. V'dafka b'leilei Shabbos. However, this is only true Friday night. That you're boitzeya on the tachtoina. This that you cut the bottom loaf is only Friday night. Aval b'yoyim ha-Shabbos, or b'leilei Yom Tov, but Shabbos by day, or even Yom Tov by night, boitzeya al ha'elyoina, then you make the bracha on the top challah. V'atamru al derech Kabbalah, and this is all based on divrei Kabbalah. Okay, we'll stop over here. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The source of limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rosh Hashanah should send Yeshua's refuahs parnasim shidduchim to all those in need. We should be zeichet to see the Bias Kal Tzedek b'meher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.